Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to episode 17 of the Anchor Group podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Alex from Resolve. And if you are a merchant who sells to B2B customers and you're struggling with your net terms and kind of how you manage those and offer those to your customers, this is going to be the episode for you. There's going to be opportunities where you will be able to save internal time and save some money and get paid faster. So if you're sick of being a bank for your customers, that's where Resolve can come in. So stay tuned. We'll dig into it. Here we go. Alex, thanks for joining on the Anchor Group podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing fantastic. I'm excited for our conversation today. And I'm hoping in this conversation we can cover a couple things, right? I know you work a lot with B2B merchants on your solution. But hopefully we can talk about kind of pain points that or problems that B2B businesses are experiencing, kind of what they expect in 2025 as things continue to evolve and change. Then let's get into your solution about how it works, then maybe how people can find out more. How does that sound for kind of the agenda for today's podcast?
It sounds good. Yeah, looking forward to it. Fantastic. I think that's a great start.
And I'm glad that we got connected. I know we both work a lot with a company called Blue Snap, and they really made the introduction between us, and I'm glad that they did. When we first spoke, I was really impressed by you and your team and the solution you guys have, so we're excited to dig into that. Now, Alex, what part, just help educate those who are listening to us today, what part of the ecosystem of e-commerce do you really live in?
Yeah, so it's a bit of, I'd say, a hybrid solution. Resolve is a B2B buy now, pay later platform. So we work with e-commerce brands, of course, but we also work with a lot of brands that primarily transact offline. So, for example, businesses that primarily invoice through their ERP, and they have large sales teams that are going and directly working with their customers. So that is where Resolve started is actually on the offline. We've been around now for I think about 7 years, and so that was really where it started was on the offline. But now in the past few years, of course, there's this large movement of course B2B brands trying to move online, and there's all these platforms specifically being built out in e-commerce for B2B right now, and so that's been a shift over the past few years to build out solutions for B2B businesses online. And so how you can actually provide net terms online is very different than offline, as you can imagine.
That's right. And I like how you mentioned, providing solutions, special solutions for B2B merchants who are really wanting to take the next step, going from a small business to a medium business in 2025. And so I know you speak with a lot of merchants and that sort of things, but let's dig into a couple of pain points that we see, on a daily basis when we speak with customers or merchants. One thing that I see is that, especially on the payment side, is that if a merchant has a customer, a smaller customer, sometimes they have a really hard time, right, being able to pay for an order that's, $10K or around that ballpark.
Yeah.
Right? That's one thing that I, see that when merchants come to us at Anchor Group, since we're an agency, right, we're helping them try to figure out, hey, how can you best serve your customer? What can you do to actually get sales in the door, especially if somebody wants to buy from you? What are some things that you're seeing in the B2B space that are just problems people are experiencing?
Yeah, that one definitely resonates. We see a lot of challenges on the onboarding time for net terms as well. And this is not only for small businesses, but large ones as well, as you can imagine. Even with quite large AR teams, if you have a customer that wants to pay on terms, a lot of times, unless they have a long-term relationship with that customer, a lot of businesses won't offer them terms, where they'll say, if it's a new customer, put through a few orders on credit card, or check, and then we'll see if we can offer you terms, right? So that onboarding time for new customers that want to pay on net terms is something that we've seen and that we solve for, obviously quite
Yeah.
I'd say in a streamlined fashion, because now instead of having an onboarding time of like even weeks or months, right? If they have to put through orders with you, to using Resolve, where we can approve customers for terms in minutes. So going from minutes to weeks or months is quite a dramatic shift, as you can imagine.
Alex, is that normally the time frame you see for getting people approved or getting companies approved for AR teams? Is that normally like a couple weeks, a couple months? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, usually it's about at least 1 to 2 weeks for a lot of our merchants that have had like an in-house team.
Yeah.
It's about 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, that makes sense. And and that's like for a lot of companies, right? That's if that merchant has a history of doing business with that person, right? With that company.
Yep,
like if they
absolutely.
don't, right? That timeline. Now we're talking 6 months, right? You
Yeah.
want to go through a couple of transactions with that company.
Yep.
And if you're in B2B, right, they might be placing an order every 6 months. And now we're stretching that timeline out year and a half.
Yep.
So, and one thing that sticks out to me, right, with that process, like that can get bogged down, I think, is what we're both kind of alluding to. Now, I used to work for a manufacturing company on the sales team. And one thing that would get really frustrating is like you have a customer or a potential customer who wants to do business with you, but because of some of those, that red tape, right, for lack of a better term, you can't accept that order. And that's where I see like a solution like Resolve, right, can help eliminate some of that red tape if the solution works out for the merchant. So as a sales team, right, I get excited about this as a salesperson because next thing you know, I don't have to wait for 6 months or a year and a half to get through a couple of cycles of orders, to go through the 2 to 3 weeks of the AR process there.
Exactly.
Just get that sale across the line sooner.
Exactly. That's why it's a great boost to not only your AR team, but we also how we speak with a lot of merchants is that it's very much a sales accelerator as well for your sales team. And that's a large demographic that we work with, in Resolve, in terms of like who's actually using the platform are these sales teams. Because, in conversation with a customer, you can run that credit check process even like in the actual like sales call itself, right? So if you have their info, you can start that credit check, and then you can say, hey, by the way, you're pre-approved for $10,000 or $20,000 in credit. Here's a link that you can get started. So that's not quite as easy to do with an in-house team, of course, because you usually have to get them to fill out, like a 3 to 5 page form, put their trade references on there. Usually those references are going to be your competitor, right? where they've been previously purchasing from. So that can get pretty awkward, as you can imagine, where you have to call up your competitors and ask them if they're going to pay on or how they've been paying their bills. So we cut out all of that red tape, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And that's like, if I'm if I put on my sales manager hat, right, or business, how to improve the sales org, like I want to remove as much of that red tape as possible for my salespeople. And if I'm a salesperson, especially one who carries a quote, all right, I want to make sure that I have all the tools necessary to be able to meet my quote, especially if people are knocking at the door wanting to hand us money, right, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. Now, and I know later we can get more into like the nuts and the bolts of what this actually looks like on a very practical level.
Yep.
But I think what we've identified here is like there are some real pain points that you and I are both seeing, me on the agency side, you on the tech partner side, of like there are merchants experiencing problems, and Resolve Pay could be a good fit for this. Now, as we shift the conversation here, let's talk about like we know what the problems are, but what are people actually expecting in 2025? Now, every time I talk to somebody about this, the idea always comes up. Well, people expect an Amazon-like experience, right? And our, as we buy, I know my family has an Amazon Prime account, right? I'm sure a lot of people do these days, but that's become like, I feel like the gold standard, if you will, for the buying experience. And I'm just curious, like that's, very B2C focused, but I'm just curious, do you hear an Amazon-like experience? Do you hear that thrown around a lot? Or what's your take on that, especially in the B2B space?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is, a movement that is a lot of brands are trying to take B2C style sort of like transaction flows and have that in the B2B space. I think that resonates with a lot of businesses that are trying to move from a very offline focused sales approach to a completely online channel. And so that definitely resonates. We do hear that quite a lot, where they want a B2C like buying experience for a B2B company. Yeah, that definitely is the case. We work with a lot of brands that are trying to do that. I think there's also a bit of a hybrid approach that we've been seeing where, especially with BigCommerce and B2B Edition, you still have sales reps that are actively involved in the buying process. So of course, you can have, full self-serve, customers go and check out. But those sales reps are also actively involved in that buying experience. They're, creating quotes, they're sending quotes to customers, or they're even like masquerading, right?
Right.
As the customer and closing that order because they just got a phone call. So I think that is something that we're seeing as well. So it's a bit of both, I'd say.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And what I personally kind of challenge on the idea of like, oh, we want an Amazon-like experience is that some things are inherently, like you're pointing out, going to be different.
Yep.
From B2B transactions online and B2C transactions. So like the idea of an Amazon-like experience from the flow, from the ease of use, from the path to purchase, like quite honestly, how easy it is to purchase something on Amazon, cool. Like that's amazing, right? If I'm a B2B company, like many B2B merchants, when they say that, that's what they're looking for. But like you're saying, there are inherently those things that you need in a B2B business that you don't need in that B2C business. And I like how you point out BigCommerce, that B2B edition. So here at Anchor Group, we're a certified BigCommerce partner. We help set up essentially BigCommerce and specifically that B2B edition app for merchants who want it or want to improve their BigCommerce website. That's kind of where we come in. And we see that be very useful. What we like about that is like, what we're getting at here is that B2B edition app helps kind of automatically in a more organic way include those B2B needs right into a BigCommerce website. So it kind of naturally, you're on track to have that more Amazon-like feel for a B2B business.
Exactly. Yeah, we definitely see that as well. I mean, we work a lot with BigCommerce. As you can imagine, we have a BigCommerce app, that we've published quite some time ago. So yeah, I think it caters to a really nice use case where, you can have that self-serve flow online, right? Especially if you're a smaller business, it's great. But then you're able to, of course, for certain industries as well, it's very sales rep heavy, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so that's where that feature set comes in, where you're able to have that whole quote to cash flow completely online and sort of like take the burden off of a little bit of your team as well.
Yeah, and I'd echo that idea. Like, take that all online, and like, what we see is people just want, I always compare. Sometimes I compare things to electricity. Electricity always takes the path of least resistance, right?
Yep.
And sometimes I feel like whether you're a customer, whether you're a sales rep, like sometimes people just naturally take the path of least resistance as well, and that's where really good e-commerce websites and even companies that are taking B2B online, like they do the same thing, right? They want to give their customers the path of least resistance, and with that, what you're saying, like I think we look for automation, and we also look for things we kind of expect in 2025 as technology continues to improve. One of them being like real-time decisions, and one thing I like about your solution is like the real-time credit decisions, like that's very valuable. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's super valuable in the online context, as you can imagine, as well. And so, yeah, I mean, especially with BigCommerce, really how Resolve works is essentially your customers can apply for credit online on your store. So at any point, they can access a credit application, or they can even apply directly at checkout, which is quite nice because you can offer net terms for guests as well, which is virtually impossible if you do that in house, right? It never happens. And so how that works is essentially, we've built out for the past, quite a few years now, or basically our whole credit model, essentially, that looks at all these different data points for a business. And essentially in just a handful of minutes, essentially we're able to obviously search all these different data points, our own internal credit decisioning logic as well, and basically return an actual credit decision and results in that actual checkout flow. So you can go from a prospective, customer to actually being approved for terms up to 25,000 instantly. Actually,
Wow.
is usually what we offer in a handful of minutes. Usually about 2 minutes, I'd say, is on average what we're looking at, and that's directly at checkout as well.
Yeah, and I think that fits the feel that many people are expecting, right? Many
Yep.
customers are expecting in the B2B space, or I think things are really trending that direction, right? As things, as people, even the buyers, these B2B buyers, continue to become more tech savvy themselves. Like, once again, it's a great way to offer the path of least resistance for these people to buy, while still, doing your due diligence to make sure that, you're selling to someone who's going to be able to pay the bill, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Let's kind of get into the nuts and bolts. And here's the deal. If you're listening to this podcast right now and any of this stuff sounds familiar, wanting some of these expectations, like more of like an Amazon, real-time feel to your B2B buying experiences. If you have had problems, on the manual side, or if your sales team feels bogged down by your current, net terms approval process, like, now's the time to turn up that radio dial, right? Because we're going to dig into the nuts and bolts of how Resolve Pay works and how this is going to solve those problems if we haven't addressed it already. And this, if you're a small business, medium business, or large business, like, this could actually be a very good solution for you. I'm going to share a quick story from my personal experience. A couple years ago, I was running or helping run a website that was selling drones, right? An e-commerce website selling drones. And essentially at the very early onset of that, we had a potential customer reach out to us that wanted to place a very large order, right? Very large. And we didn't have the ability at that time, at the onset of our business, truly be able to take on that risk as a merchant, right? Or to be able to do that in a way that we felt comfortable as a business for that. I mean, this was like our second order on the website, right?
Yep.
And so, it was legit, right? We called and we were talking, but we just unfortunately had to pass on that because we didn't have the systems in place. And so, when we talk about the nuts and bolts of this, like, that gets me excited, even from my firsthand experience doing that, because I don't know, Alex, I know you're a fan of Resolve, and the more I talk and learn about it, the more I become a fan of it too, just because it's opening up the door for empowering merchants to be able to sell more people, along with customers being able to purchase in a better way for them. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it, Alex. I know we've spoken about a couple of things here and there, but just give us a rundown, kind of top to bottom, how Resolve really fits in practically to the online ordering and to the offline ordering process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'd say, we cater to a pretty wide variety of merchants. We see a lot of smaller businesses maybe who are very online focused and who only take credit card transactions, right? Because that's simple, that's easy, foolproof, everyone does it. There's no maintenance involved. You don't have to track down collections or anything like that. Very simple. And so we offer, to businesses that only do, like, let's say, online transactions, a basically risk-free way to accept net terms. And so with Resolve, this is completely non-recourse. So let's say you have a $1,000 invoice that goes out That customer, we approve them. You receive, that $1,000 upfront minus a transaction fee, recourse free. And so essentially, you don't have to chase that customer if they don't pay, if they're late. You get your cash. You can close out, that invoice the next day when you receive the money. So that is where we see a lot of growth in the e-com space, is just being able to offer like net terms with the ease of use of like a toggle, basically, because you're not doing collections, you're not doing credit checks, you're kind of just getting your cash basically, and then offsetting basically that risk to resolve.
Yeah, and that is a very, that's a lot of value there. Like that's a lot of good value, because if I'm a merchant, put on my merchant hat and think about the business that I was part of getting set up. Like, no longer do I have my internal team chasing down people, and I'm in this situation, right, getting paid much quicker than setting up Net30 and being the bank for, the my B2B customer.
Yep.
And so I think there's a lot of value there for some specific companies.
Yeah, and that's what we see in the online space, with a lot of BigCommerce merchants. Now offline, there's a ton of different use cases as well. A lot of our merchant base, previously, did in-house net terms, right? But they were stuck with this onboarding issue, or they would only issue maybe very small lines of credit, very conservative lines of credit, because obviously they weren't sure about the risk profile for the buyer, right? Or they just didn't have the capacity to chase, and do collections. And so that's where Resolve fits in for offline businesses as well, who work primarily within accounting software or ERPs. We do have native integrations for like NetSuite, for example, where we can pull in invoices and customer records from NetSuite. So your sales team can, put through an invoice like they normally do, and still able to receive, that cash upfront for those invoices and offsetting the risk to Resolve. And so that's how we work in an offline use case, where we augment an existing AR team, or just allow a merchant to even offer terms to more customers or larger lines of credit as well.
So, talking about the practical aspects, if somebody's listening to this right now and they want to essentially like get signed up for Resolve, what does that process even look like to be able to, if we think about the offline and the online portion, like what level of effort does that merchant need to go through in order to get you all integrated into their ecosystem? And that's just for sake of example. Let's say they have NetSuite as their ERP in the back end, since, Anchor Group, we work with a lot of people that have NetSuite. And just once again, for the sake of the example, let's say they're running BigCommerce on their front end.
As simple as it could be, to be honest with those, we have, a public app in the BigCommerce App Store. And so it's a one-click install, no code. You literally click a button, install the app, and it hooks up with your Resolve account. And that, allows your customers to apply for terms at checkout and check out on net terms using Resolve. And in NetSuite, same thing. We have a one-click installation there. It installs, our extension within your NetSuite instance, and then we could start syncing customers and invoices in from NetSuite, and then any payouts, of course, that we send for the advances on the invoice, or any payments from the customer. Those payouts get synced back to your NetSuite instance as well. So it's honestly as seamless as it could be for NetSuite and the BigCommerce, I'd say.
Now, I think for a lot of people listening, one sticking point they might have is that transaction fee. Because we know if they go through other routes, right, for payment, there might not be the transaction fee there. So talk to us a little bit about that transaction fee.
Yeah, I mean, we see it. It's quite similar to like a credit card processing fee. So, whether online or offline, you'll have that credit card processing fee. And so that is part of, I'd say, offsetting risk to Resolve. There's a lot of value in that in terms of offsetting the risk for whether that's fraud, whether that's late payment, complete non-payment as well. And also being able to offer, of course, more credit so that you can increase AOV and more frequent purchases as well. So there's a ton of value, I'd say, in, yes, of course, there is a cost to it, like everything.
Right.
But as something that's comparable to credit card, but I think drives a lot more value than what you would get with just offering credit card purchases.
Right. And you're able to address a whole different segment of the business, or whole different kind of buyer.
Exactly.
In a different way.
Because people expect, a lot of buyers expect terms, right? Depending on the industry you're in, they'll expect terms. That's really the expectation in a lot of industries. And if you don't have an easy way to offer them terms, right, they can easily just go to a competitor. I think,
and Alex, in regards to offering terms, who gets to decide what terms are leveraged for that or offered to that customer? Is that on the Resolve side, or is that on the merchant side?
So we work with a variety. So whether that's you want to offer net 30, net 45, net 60, net 90, that's completely up to you. So you can offer as many or as little as you want. Most of the time it'll be net 30 or 60. But you can offer, you can customize it per customer as well. So if you want one customer to go net 30 by default, you can set that. And if another customer that usually pays a little later, you can do net 60. So you have the option to configure that.
Fantastic. Now, as we kind of start to wrap things up here, do you have any strong case studies of when Resolve has really been useful?
Absolutely. I think we have a lot of great case studies, as you can imagine. I think because we've spoken a lot about the value, I think, that Resolve can bring to a merchant. Whether that's a merchant that already offers net terms, or one that has never done it before. And I think a great one that I can think of is one of our merchants, SS and SI, who was previously doing in-house net terms, just manually doing the KYC and running those trade references, and they would get into those pretty awkward situations that I described, where those credit references that their customers were putting down were their own competitors, and so as you can imagine, those references wouldn't want to give a reference, and so they were pretty limited in terms of the amount of credit that they can give, or they were just risking it, right? They were saying, I don't know, maybe they'll be a good fit, maybe they won't. And so, I think they've been on Resolve for a long time now, many years. And they're able, I think, to save over 80 hours a week in AR and collections after offering Resolve. And they've seen over a 5x increase in revenue since offering a Resolve to their customers. I think it's about 10% year over year growth that they're seeing as well. So they've been, a great partner with us for a long time now.
Yeah, and those are meaningful numbers there.
Absolutely.
Especially when we talk about, here at Ant Group, we work with a lot of manufacturers and distributors, and when we talk about some of the troubled waters that the industry or the economy's in today, some uncertainty, right, due to tariffs or whatnot, right? Like those numbers you just threw out, like those are meaningful numbers that could make a difference whether you're, what your year-over-year numbers really look like. And so what we see on the agency side is that sometimes like making what I will call like little tweaks to a tech stack and to the way you do business with customers, like that can be such a game changer. And it doesn't need to be redesigning your entire website. It doesn't need to be going with a totally different solution as an ERP in the back end. But like sometimes adding services like this, if they fit your business well, like they can actually be game changing for the year.
Absolutely. And we're not talking about a custom checkout or anything like that. If you're on BigCommerce, it's a one-click install There's no code necessary, no change necessary, and it just saves you time, and obviously boosts your AOV, increases your cash flow. For, like you said, such a small tweak, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
And so here's the deal. If you're listening to this right now and some of these things have resonated with you, if you're like, maybe I should look more into that, by all means, feel free to reach out to Anchor Group. We are an e-commerce and software agency. We work a lot in the NetSuite, SuiteCommerce, SuiteCommerce Advanced, BigCommerce space. So feel free to reach out to us. But Alex, if people want to learn more about Resolve or more about you, how can they learn more?
Yeah, resolvepay.com. That's the easiest way to do it. And then you can get in touch with our team really easily from there, either through the chatbot, or you can contact sales directly at the top over there.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. I think there's going to be some people listening to this who genuinely find this valuable and like it could be a value add to really take them to the next level, especially in this next year. So thank you for hopping on and joining us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It's been great, Michael.
And as always, you guys, if you want to learn more about Anchor Group, if you want to listen to more podcast episodes, you can always check out our website, anchorgroup.tech. You can check out our YouTube channel where these episodes are posted, or of course you can log on to Spotify where you might be listening to this right now. And as always, feel free to reach out to us, on those platforms, leave comments, or connect with us on LinkedIn. We always try to share useful information on there, and always happy to connect in that capacity as well. So this is officially the end of episode 17, and we'll see you all next week for the next episode.